You insert your key into the cylinder. Nothing. You hear the key go in, and sometimes there's a familiar click as all the lights come on and the car is startable, and sometimes there's no click and you turn the key and nothing happens. This is your ignition switch on its way to car part Valhalla. In today's video, we show you how to replace it, parts and tools required, share what causes the issue, and share how to avoid causing this problem in the future. We share common pitfalls and what not to do during the procedure to avoid mistakes. There are two ways to replace your ignition switch. One method involves leaving the dash trim in place and has less steps involved, but involves reaching under the dash and operating by feel at certain times. The other method, the one I prefer, is more detailed, involved, but is not too complicated and you see what you're working with. We elect to do the latter method in this video, made this video more thorough, and we take off the dash trim. Many will say this is unnecessary. If you feel like trying to skip dash removal, skip the dash trim removal and skip ahead in the chapters below to just the ignition switch removal. I would personally recommend just taking on another interesting project and removing the dash to get to it. Replacing the ignition switch makes your car feel like new, by the way. It's one of those minor details that has a big impact because every time you put your key in, it has a new, satisfying insertion sensation, and the key is solidly held instead of sloppily. Before you start, don't put your key in the cylinder before you've connected it electronically. It will get stuck. If it is stuck, see my guide here to remove a stuck key. The OEM part through OEM websites can be expensive. If you buy it from partsgeek.com, it looks like an off-brand part in the listing, but they ship the Bosch OEM part in the off-brand box with identical part numbers. Here is the part number at PartsGeek, and it's in the video description as well. The bad news: at the time of the making of this video, it's unfortunately out of stock, and hopefully it returns soon. But here's some good news. You don't need to deal with reprogramming at the dealer or key lock cylinders. On the 987, the mechanism reads off the cuts on the key and tells that digitally to the ECU. The lower A-pillar plastic trim piece is held in by two clips that we can pry out and then pull out. It can get caught on the gasket and can take some wiggling to get out. This is normal. Remove the key bezel. Pry it out using a plastic tool and it pops out. Remove the headlight switch by turning it counterclockwise as if you're turning it off normally. Press in and turn it clockwise. It'll only do a half or quarter turn, but will then be pullable. Pull it out and use a flathead to press in on the tab on the connector to remove it. Remove the leather footwell panel. First, we'll remove the carpet footwell trim piece using a T30. Using a T20, the two Torx screws holding the leather footwell panel come out. The footwell panel is held on via three clips at the front. Pull evenly to avoid snapping the plastic legs inside the panel. Behind the steering wheel vinyl cover, there's a Torx screw that's difficult to access and remove, but it must be accessed and removed. Using a plastic pry tool, you can pop the vinyl cover off backwards, and that lets you easily access the Torx screw. I only realized this when I was reinstalling the panel, so for removal I used a borescope camera to see and remove the Torx screw. You will need a thin, long hex shank extension and a Torx bit. A socket set that is Torx is unlikely to work. Remove the Torx screw inside of the headlight switch at the top middle. Mine fell in, and it's okay if yours does too, because we'll get it later. You'll see me remove the headlight switch Torx screws as well, but that's unnecessary. Remove the 8 easily accessible Torx screws. 2 on the left, 3 on the underside, and 3 on the right side. Removing one of them on the right might be unnecessary. Disconnect the light at the bottom dashboard panel. Push in on the connector on both sides and it pulls out. At this point, the bottom dashboard panel can be removed. It catches on the fuse box carpet trim and silver trim above it, but it's unnecessary to remove those even though you see me remove the silver trim. And the silver trim pops off downwards using a pry tool. The right side of the panel drops down freely, but the left side is held in by a plus-shaped piece of plastic. If you push it in, the whole panel is released. You don't need to disconnect the thin wire on the left. It's held in by a clip via pressure. Just pull upwards on it to unseat it. The ignition switch is now accessible. You can use a flathead screwdriver to disconnect the ignition switch. The connector can be a bit stubborn. The ignition switch is held in by a plastic bezel that screws on from the front. You can unseat it with a screwdriver and finish removing it by hand. As we can see, the part numbers are different. They are both compatible. To make sure it works, I connected the key cylinder and gave it a twist. New cylinder can confirm it works. A minor detail I didn't realize is that a new lock cylinder makes your car look and feel like new. The simple action of sliding your key into a new, smooth, unworn cylinder changes the experience for the better. After confirming it works, we can continue reinstalling. To correctly seat the new ignition switch, the bulky part goes towards the top, the key opening goes towards the bottom, and the electrical connector is at the top. Install the inner bezel by screwing it on and tightening it with a flathead, making sure the screwdriver doesn't slip off and scratch the leather. To reinstall the lower dash trim, first we leverage in the left side over the fuse box carpet, and then we reinsert the plastic plus into the plastic on the dash piece. Here's a shot of leveraging it in. Reinsert the connector on the left into its bracket, and then raise the right side of the dash trim piece, and the whole piece should click back into position. It might take a few tries, non-forcefully. You will know it's seated properly when all of the Torx screw holes have lined up on the left and right. We then proceed to reinstall all of the Torx screws we removed during removal, starting with the ones on the bottom, then the left side, reinserting the headlight trim, which we removed but didn't need to, then reinstalling the right side Torx screws, reinstalling the light at the bottom, and reinstalling the leather carpeting panel on the bottom right. We then reinstall the lower A-pillar trim piece on the left side, and then the bezel on the key cylinder. Then the headlight switch goes back in, we simply reconnect it, reinsert it, and done on that front. So now without this last screw, we haven't installed the last screw yet, we might try or we might leave it off. I thought it would be impossible and risky to reinstall it with the Torx screw falling back in, but then I discovered a way to get it back in easily. This is the worst that can happen. If you really pull on it, it might creak a little. I just figured out that you can actually remove the steering column trim or vinyl cover by using a plastic pry tool and pushing backwards. It simply unclips, we can pull it up, and we can easily see that very difficult Torx screw inside from here. There we go. So actually we might be able to reach it from inside. So that's how you do it. You unclip this vinyl cover. We did it. The hex shank is magnetic, so I was able to hold it down at an angle and to tighten it, and I'm just going to tighten it now. Last piece doesn't shake at all. I highly recommend a magnetized hex shank. A low profile tool like this helped me insert the hex shank into one of the heads here. That'll also link. It's like a micro socket wrench. And if you need a magnetizing tool, or just buy a magnetized hex shank, you can use one of these bad boys. Every time. Every time. Oh, such a nice satisfying tumble as it goes in. So, why does this issue occur? This issue occurs because it's actually the weight of the items on the keychain. There's like some sort of friction component that goes on involving the turning and the insertion. And what happens is, to detect the key, there's all these tumblers, right? But The issue is exacerbated when you have significant weight on your key, which wears it down because the weight of the stuff inside the key wears the stuff inside of the mechanism down over time. So how do you avoid the issue? You avoid the issue by using keys with lighter keychains over time. So you can either worry about the weight you have on the keychain or replace this $200 part every 18 years. So those are the two choices. Thanks for watching.